Welcome back to Going Walkabout. The recent fires in Los Angeles made me think about losing everything. We made a choice to sell everything 3 years ago and travel. And while it's not as jolting as losing everything in one fell swoop, like these poor folks in Los Angeles, it's still hard to separate from things that you've grown to love. So in this video, we'll review 6 steps that it took me to go through to be free of things and live life fully without a load of stuff. You'll notice the background is very different, and that's because we're in Mérida, Mexico, in the Yucatan. And I'll show you a little glimpse of the house here. It's very pretty. And so on to step number 1. So the first step that I noticed was that it was a progression, and it took about 3 years. We're in the 3rd year now. But we had a storage unit for clothes and for a few key items, some pieces of artwork, but it's a small storage unit. But I had about 10 bins of clothes. After year 1, that went down to, I think, 8 bins. After year 2, it went down to 5 bins. And now in year 3, I'm down to 1 bin of clothing. So all of my work clothes went, all of the clothes for going out in fancy dress went. It was a progression that took me time, but heads up to anybody who has to have this happen to them quickly, you can get rid of this stuff in year 1. You don't need to go through 3 years like I did. So part of that 3-year step-by-step process for me of getting rid of these clothes that were, let's say, in our storage unit, there was also a kind of dialogue going on in back of my head about the things I took with me in my suitcase. Because I only have 1 suitcase that I'm allowed to take because we're traveling a lot on buses and trains and so forth, and I have to be able to manage it myself. So the first question I would ask is, did I use this item this trip? Sad to say that 75% of the time I didn't use many of the items, which was a little shocking. Have I used this in the last year? Have I used this item in the last year? Whether it be a coat or a pair of pants or whatever, have I used it? And in many cases, 75% of the time, the answer to that was no. And then lastly, why am I bringing this item with me? And this is going to sound a little pathetic, but it was the whole thing of, well, someday I'm going to fit into these pants and they're going to look really great on me, so I better bring them with me in case I lose that weight. Which, by the way, didn't happen. So we delude ourselves with thinking that we're going to use something or need something that we actually won't use or won't need. So the third thing that I noticed was that the reality came down to I literally would use things that were comfortable. And think about it. How many society events do we go to? Well, most of us don't go to many. So those kind of clothing, you really don't use that often. What you find yourself getting attracted to is clothing that is comfortable and practical. And so it took me a while to realize that the pants that would never fit me were neither comfortable or practical. And yet the clothing that I needed that was what I should be packing more of. And then the other things where maybe we'll get asked out for dinner, maybe we'll be asked to some special event, those kind of clothes were absolutely not of any value. So starting to think in a more practical way helped a lot in me starting to skinny down the things I was lugging around the world with me. At number 4, I have a point that is very, I think, visual. I spent the last 3 years lugging around a suitcase. When I first started lugging this suitcase around, it was 75 pounds. I'm 66 years old, and 75 pounds, that's a lot for me to be lifting. Thank God for yoga. However, as I started realizing I'm the one paying for this materialism, maybe I can fix it a little bit by lugging around a bit less. I envisioned myself as this turtle with everything on their back. It was getting quite heavy, and it wasn't very fun, needless to say, at the end of a long travel day. Now, my bag weighs 45 pounds as recently as 2 days ago when I left California. And so what it makes me realize is that I've skinnied down over time. So if it has to happen to you quickly, just realize that you can get used to it. You can get used to less. And it actually feels better lighter, and it does feel like you're carrying around less of a weight on your back as a turtle might. So at number 5, one of the things I have that actually took me by surprise is it's interesting that you don't miss this stuff. You don't miss this extra clothing. The time it takes to not miss something, usually less than 24 hours. I've given away so much clothing all over the world and I don't miss a thing. You focus more on the activity you're doing instead of what you're wearing. And that is very freeing. I can kind of understand why Steve Jobs just always wore jeans and a black t-shirt, because if you want to focus on the people around you and you want to focus on your surroundings, it really helps not to be concerned about what you're wearing. And then people judge you on the content of your soul and not so much on the content of the fabrics that you're wearing, would hopefully be the case. So at number 6, I have what I've realized lastly is that we expand into the space that we're given. In my case, a suitcase, I just kept stuffing it full to 75 pounds when now I've got it down to 45 pounds. But we do the same thing with homes or apartments or condos or boats. We tend to expand into those spaces instead of realizing we don't need those things. We don't need that stuff. And so I think one of the biggest benefits of living a nomadic lifestyle for the last 3 years is realizing how unimportant stuff is, how unimportant clothing is. And really the things that are important are the great conversations, seeing new places, really sitting down and having a great talk with somebody in your family, like your husband or your kids. Those are the things that really fill us up. Not a full house or a full suitcase in my case. So what you've heard people say, I think is true, and that is that when you have less stuff, you feel lighter, your being feels lighter, your soul feels lighter. It's true, because you don't have to worry about that stuff. I will say this, I did this by choice. So I chose to get rid of all of my things, as did my husband. Very easy for him to do because he could live out of a paper bag. But for me, it was a little bit harder. I do feel so much for the people that have gone through the fires in Los Angeles. They had some amazing stuff. There were actors that had amazing awards, and there were school teachers that had their notes from students and things of that nature. If anybody watches this, they can derive is that stuff, it can be lost. And you can actually feel better for it. Maybe not right away, but at some stage, you can feel better. With that said, for me, this feeling of having less but experiencing more is a great byproduct of the nomadic lifestyle. I hope this video has helped you think differently about stuff and maybe realize how you can get rid of it and still have a really fulfilling lifestyle, even if you don't become a nomad like myself. Certainly, I really appreciate all of those who've watched. Thank you so much for those that have subscribed. And if you've enjoyed the video, a thumbs up is really appreciated, as well as subscribing. Appreciate that too. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week. Cheers for now.